For my third memory tips video, I'm going to talk about memorizing lists of items. Lists of information are often needed. You can think of a shopping list, a to-do list. Students often have to memorize lists of information. And what if I told you that by the end of this video, somebody would be able to tell you a list of 20 items once, and you'd be able to not only recall them in order, but you could actually say them backwards. I've actually done it with 50 items, hearing them only once and been able to tell them backwards using these techniques. And as you might have guessed, if you saw my first video talking about how to never lose your keys or your phone again, it involves creating original awareness. So it involves tricking your brain into paying attention in a way that will lock that information into your memory. And so I think no better way to illustrate it than with a list. I should mention that this list of items is something that I read yesterday once out of a book and didn't look back at since then. And I'm going to use this list today to illustrate how we might remember a list. And so we're going to start with a lamp. And so I want you to create a picture in your mind of a lamp that you know, and we're going to link that lamp to paper. And however you want to do it, you want to make sure that it is an unusual sort of image. And the way you make it unusual, it can involve a large number, it can involve a large size, it can involve action of some kind of movement, violence, and it can involve anything that you want to do to make it unusual. So say, for instance, it might be unusual for you to go and switch on a piece of paper, and that paper is your bed lamp. That could be unusual enough for you to remember it. Or it could be something where there's instead of a lamp, a giant lamp is made up of a whole bunch of reams of paper. Whatever it is, let's lock that in your mind. Actually take a moment to think about that image in your mind. Then the next thing that we're going to link paper to a bottle. And so these are two very different concepts. Find a way to, in a very absurd way, link paper to a bottle. For me, when I think of paper, I think of Staples. I imagine a giant bottle filling a Staples store. And that's all I need, but whatever image is unusual to you, think of that image right now. Really picture it in your mind. Then the next thing we're going to link to is we're going to link bottle to bed. Now it's very easy to come up with an unusual image for this because bottles aren't usually in beds. So you might imagine yourself sleeping on a giant bottle, or you might imagine going to your bed, lifting up the covers, and there's a giant bottle inside. The next thing we're going to link the next thing we're going to link bed to is fish. Again, very easy to do an unusual image with this. Imagine a giant fish is in your bed, or imagine you're sleeping on a giant fish. Then the next thing we're going to link fish to is telephone. All I need to do is think of lifting a fish to my face. But the important thing is, even though it's unusual, I really have to take a moment to actually picture that image in my mind, that I'm talking into a fish. Then the next one I'm going to link to is window. You might imagine going to the window and 1,000 phones flying into your face. You might imagine talking into a window as a telephone. Then the next one we're going to do is link window to flowers. You could think of a bouquet of windows, or you might think that you go to the window and flowers come flying in and hit you in the face. Then the next one, we're going to link flower to a hammer. I could think of having a bouquet of flowers that I'm hammering into the wall and looking at the wall, and it's full of flowers holding it all together. Then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a hammer and link that to a typewriter. So imagine I'm taking a hammer and just bashing the keys of the typewriter, and that's how I'm typing. Or maybe I'm using a typewriter to hammer nails in. And so all I've done is just come up with a picture for each of those items. But now, if I ask you to think of a lamp, if you've made a good enough picture, you're going to think of a piece of paper. When I ask you to think of the piece of paper, you're going to think of the bottle. When I tell you to think of the bottle, you're going to think of a bed, which makes you think of a fish, which makes you think of a telephone, which makes you think of a window, which makes you think of a flower, which makes you think of a hammer, which makes you think of a typewriter. And if I started with typewriter, you could just as easily go backwards, because all you're doing is remembering those pictures. Now, I actually encourage you to try this out, and you can ask a friend to give you a list of 20 different things. And here's the key: they have to be concrete things. We'll talk about how to memorize abstract concepts later, but for now we're going to do concrete, easy to picture things. So ask the person to come up with 20 different concrete, easy to picture things, and make sure that they write them down. And in the time that your friend writes each item down, you're thinking about a picture in your mind that goes with that association. And then as they give you the next item and they write it down, you're linking that item to the one before. And if you need to, the first time, just for your confidence, ask them to pause for a minute until you make that image in your mind. That's fine. But make sure that they only tell you once what that item is. And you'll find this list could be 20 items long, 30 items long, 50 items long. It doesn't matter. You're going to remember that list easily. You're going to just as easily be able to start halfway and go backwards or forwards. You could start at the end and go backwards. It doesn't matter. That list will be locked in your mind. Now, one thing you may ask is, when you make these images, how long do they stay in your mind? And if you really want to lock them into long-term memory, what you usually want to do is test yourself right away, make sure that they're in there, then recall them again after an hour or so, and then the next morning go over them again in your mind. And any of the links, so to speak, the links of this chain that aren't 100% solid, you can just go over that image, maybe try to make it even more ridiculous in your mind. And the interesting thing is you can actually review in your mind. You don't even have to go back to the original list. So this is a really powerful technique, a really powerful way of memorizing any kind of list of information. I'll go over in another video how you can use this method to remember speeches and remember different types of connected information. But for now, have fun with this trick. It's a really fun way to impress your friends, and you'll see what I said in the first video, that you actually do have a great memory. It's just that you haven't been putting the information in the right way. And I'm going to teach you how to do that in future videos too. We're going to get into some really exciting stuff coming up. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye-bye.